Welcome to the STEM Pathways with Rohan Sharma podcast, where we dive into the exciting world of science, technology, engineering, and math. In each episode, we share exciting stories, groundbreaking research, and inspiring interviews with experts and enthusiasts who are pushing the boundaries of innovation. Whether you're a student, a professional, or just curious about how the world works, join us as we explore the endless possibilities of STEM. Let's get started. Today, I'll be interviewing Steve Mclaughlin, who is a professor at Georgia Tech. So, to get started, I wanted to ask what made you interested in your major of electrical engineering back when you were in high school and going into college?
Well, thanks, Rohan. It's really fun to be here, and thank you for doing what it is you're doing to inform students about STEM and parents. What got me interested in electrical engineering? I got lucky. By that I mean, in my senior year in high school, I was taking physics, and the physics teacher kind of said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And I had no idea. I didn't. None of my family was an engineer. And I was just good in math and science. And that was a time where the physics professor said, "Hi, you might think about electrical engineering." And that was it. That was the total amount of kind of thinking that went in. I started a major in electrical engineering, and it turned out I was good at it and I liked it. And I like to say there was more to it than because I fiddled around or, tinkered with stuff. None of that. I got lucky, and I had a really fantastic physics teacher that kind of pointed me in a direction that maybe knew better than I did.
Yeah. So, what was your experience like at Northwestern when you were getting your bachelor's?
I'll talk about maybe some personal things, and then more the technical. Like, I was a kid who was really unsure. We talk about imposter syndrome. That's really common. I always say I invented that word. That was a long time ago. Just was really unsure. Didn't feel like I thought I was the stupidest person ever accepted to Northwestern. And so like I had a kind of a mindset that led me to just work. And so I worked a ton, and did well. It paid off, but I think my experience was I probably didn't enjoy college as much as I could have or maybe should have. But I studied a ton. I learned a lot about electrical engineering, and I was really lucky to find something that I liked. I did have some fun. Northwestern's in Chicago, so it's pretty easy to have fun there. But I think mostly I studied because I was just worried and anxious most of the time.
Yeah. So, when did you decide that you wanted to keep going in your education and get a master's?
I think because I was pretty good at it, that I think like, and there were parts of what it is I studied that I didn't really understand. I did okay, but I still didn't really understand. So I think I kind of developed this mindset of like, if you didn't understand it, like keep going till I understand it. I was really lucky to get a job with AT&T Bell Labs. So at the time, Bell Labs was the most prominent, kind of company research program really in the world. And because I had done well, they hired me, and they actually paid for my master's. So I went to work for Bell Labs, and 6 months later, they shipped me off to Princeton, and still paid me as an employee and paid me to do my master's full time. So that was kind of a no-brainer.
Mhm. And yeah, what was your experience like at Princeton?
Um, you talk about feeling like the stupidest person that they had ever accepted at Northwestern. At Princeton went to a whole other level. Was like, wow, I'm at this place that's, it's such a storied place. And guess what? I did pretty well. Again, studied really hard because I was working for AT&T. They, was more of a job than kind of a student, kind of a combination student and job. And so I worked really hard, finished my master's in just 1 year. And so it was a good experience. Like, met a ton of really smart people, ton of really nice people, made some kind of lifelong friendships there, but it was just 1 year.
Yeah. So, when did you decide you want to do a PhD?
Yeah, so after my master's degree, I worked for Bell Labs for a little while, and then decided to completely change, and I went to go work for a consulting firm for NASA. So I moved to Washington, D.C., and worked at a NASA base, Goddard Space Flight Center, and kind of really loved that. And at the time, I was dating someone, and she convinced me to go into a tutoring program, meaning there were high school students, actually junior high school students that were that were we were tutoring to take a test that allowed them to get access to a more prestigious private school. So we were tutoring students to prepare for this test, and I loved it. I absolutely loved working with students, kind of teaching them. In this case, it was all math, and preparing them for this test. And it was a small group of students. And I thought, like, wow, I was actually a pretty good teacher. And so I started to think of maybe I could be a professor, maybe I could be, kind of pursue a PhD. And after a couple of years of that, decided to apply for a PhD program. So it was really from a teaching standpoint. I wanted to be a teacher, that kind of pushed me there.
So what was your PhD research about?
My PhD research was about was something called information theory. It was in electrical engineering. It's kind of the mathematics of how communication systems work. So wireless communication systems, fiber optic communication systems, kind of some of the mathematical groundings. And I got tied up in data storage. So things like hard drives, CD, DVD storage, and now kind of like a solid state, data storage, memory. I got involved in there and how it is. So my research was how you should store information to make it reliable, secure, and easy to access.
So after you got your PhD, what was it like finally being a professor?
So finished my PhD, was kind of looking around for jobs, and I got really, really lucky, and landed my first professor job in Rochester, New York at RIT, which was my hometown. And that's where I went to high school. My mom lived there. And just pure luck that I ended up back there. And I love teaching. Just, kind of my passion for teaching kind of just got completely unleashed. And RIT at the time was a primarily teaching institution, so I got to teach a lot. Got to continue kind of my own research at the time, kind of in the same research area. Had some good luck there and getting some, really good research projects while I was teaching, and just like in my element, loving it, loving it, loving it. It snows a lot in Rochester, and so started to kind of think of like, things were going pretty well. Maybe I would start looking for another job, and I ended up here at Georgia Tech.
Yeah. So at Georgia Tech, did you start out as an assistant professor?
Yep, started out as a regular old assistant professor, cranking it out.
And how long did it take for you to get tenure?
It takes about 6 years to get tenure. So I don't know if some of folks kind of know what tenure is. You go through this 6 year kind of trial period, and at that point, you kind of prove in yourself your ability to do research, your ability to do teaching, and then the university gives you a thing called tenure, which is more or less job security. Not as important maybe as people think. Job security that gives you kind of a lot of freedom to kind of pursue the things that you want to do on the teaching front and on the research front. And so that's after 6 years.
Yeah. So I've talked to some other professors, and they told me that if you're trying to become tenured today, it's way harder than it used to be just because you have access to the internet, and it's so much easier to be like way more productive just because of the sheer access to information. What do you think about that?
That kind of says it was easy for me. So it wasn't easy, but it is really true. I mean, a place like Georgia Tech, because we're generally getting better and better and better, that means we're able to hire better and better people, and the expectations that we have around the things I talk about go up and up and up and up. So there's a lot of truth to what it is they say, and we're really, really fortunate we get to hire fantastic people from all around the world to come here, and they dig in and they do amazing things. And so like the standard is kind of going up and up and up. But at the same time, um, the vast majority of the people that kind of start here actually do get tenure because we just have, it's like Disneyland here. I mean, it's like Disneyland if you're an engineer, tons of resources, tons of, at least on the research side, amazing students to help you do your research. I want to say it's not that hard, but the way our system works, because of the really fantastic people we hire and the way that I hope we mentor them, most people are very, very successful. And like 95% of our professors that start here do get tenure.
Yeah. So something that I've been seeing about Georgia Tech is that you guys are adding a lot of new students. Why are you doing that, and how do you think it's going to help the university going forward?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. So I think where it starts from is so many other institutions. I probably shouldn't name them, but I will. The MITs, the Caltechs, the Carnegie Mellons, the Dukes, the Stanfords, the Berkeleys, that we compete with. Many of those institutions take pride in the number of students they reject, right? For many institutions, the quality is, well, we only accept 5% of the students that apply. And we don't believe our success is measured by how many students we reject. We believe our impact is measured by how many students we can bring to Georgia Tech. So that means growing. So, we still don't accept as many students as we'd like, just because we don't have enough classrooms and we don't have enough dorm space and all of those kinds of things. But our mission is to educate and train and prepare as many STEM graduates. The world needs them. We graduate the most engineers of any university in the U.S. We're very, very proud of that, and we need to do more of that. Whether they stay in Atlanta, whether they stay in the state of Georgia, whether they go somewhere else, like we're a public institution. We're paid by the taxpayers. The taxpayers expect us to produce talent that fuels the economy, and that's our job. I think a lot of institutions don't want to grow for whatever reason, but we're growing because we believe that's our calling, is to educate and train as many kind of STEM talent as we can. So we're growing. We're about to kind of pause some of that growth. Some areas we're still continue to grow, like online. In other areas, we kind of we've grown very quickly, but we're gonna pause for a little bit and see how it goes.
Yeah. So, more about the online stuff. I guess I've heard a lot about the online master's programs, especially the computer science one. And I talked to someone like literally last night who finished that a couple of years ago.
Awesome.
How do you think online education like this is going to change education overall going forward?
I think a couple things. So 10 years or so ago, there was this thing called the MOOC, massively open online course. So people started to realize they could very, very much harness the power of the internet to offer courses to thousands and thousands of people at a time with high quality. So for example, one of the very first courses that did this was an AI course at Stanford, where that particular professor had like 200,000 people taking his course in real time online. That just kind of unleashed the power of the internet. Until then, kind of online was viewed as not as good, was lower quality, was maybe easier. And I think that has been kind of disproved in that online education can be very high quality, students can have high satisfaction, and you can do it actually at a reasonable cost. And so we were one of the universities that kind of first embraced that model. We now have 23,000 students in an online program that's relatively inexpensive, but it's the same degree program that we offer on campus, very high quality, very high student satisfaction. And because we're doing it at scale, the cost to students. And so I think it's the worry 10 years ago was that online education was going to make the on-campus experience kind of irrelevant. Everything was going to be online. We didn't need campuses anymore. I think that's been disproven. There's still a ton of value about the on-campus experience, but realizing that the online experience can be just as good. So those two things can coexist. In our case, we now have 53,000 Georgia Tech students total. About 25,000 are online, and we think in this high quality program. So it's gonna fundamentally kind of open up the funnel of access to many people. Most of the people in our online are working professionals mostly from the U.S. But there's still going to be a place for the on-campus experience. I think it just opens up the funnel of opportunities for folks, and the quality is very, very high, and the student satisfaction is very high.
Yeah. So, when did you become the Dean of Engineering at Georgia Tech?
So I became the Dean of Engineering about 7 years ago. I'm now the Provost. So the Dean of Engineering oversees all engineering, and now I'm the Provost, which is nominally the number two person at Georgia Tech next to the President. So I oversee all of the academic programs, essentially all the students, all the professors, all the academic programs. So Dean of Engineering oversaw engineering. I became the dean in 2017. and then I became the provost here in 2020.
So what were your roles at the dean and as the dean, and then what are you doing now as provost?
So my role as dean was to really, oversee academic programs, oversee the hiring of professors, and equipping them and making sure they have what it is they need. My other duties were fundraising. So, for example, we have a lot of scholarships. We have a lot of, a need for infrastructure, for buildings and things like that. One of my jobs as dean was to go out and to try to raise money to do those things. You probably folks probably know that universities get a lot of donations from the outside to support their activities. So I did a lot of those things, and I did some administrative work and got to travel a lot and meet a ton of people and work with companies, try to build partnerships between companies in Georgia Tech. So a really broad range of things. At Provost, kind of really now more of the same, but instead of just engineering focus, doing it across all the sciences and business and liberal arts and design, and we do that. It's a fun job. I had the greatest job in the whole world.
And back when you were dean, was it very different from being a dean at a different college since you're dean of the biggest college of engineering in the country?
Yeah, I mean, that it I would say the thing that maybe is different is that the kind of the national role that you play because so we are the largest people were looking to us to say, from other universities are saying like, hey, how are you doing this and how are you doing this and how are you getting so many students and how are you increasing your reputation? So we had kind of a national role to kind of help raise all of engineering education. So I would say that's different than maybe some of the other deans because it sounds kind of bragging, but people look up to us to kind of help them, and so we took that role very seriously because we benefited from others that do it. So that's probably the big difference.
So you helped co-found Create X back in 2014, which from what I understand is sort of an accelerator for startups. What was it like when you started it and why did you want to start it?
Yeah, so CreateX is our program to instill entrepreneurial confidence in students and help them do startups. So like you highlighted the piece about, an incubator, but it's much broader than that. Maybe I'll come back to it in a second, but you asked how it got started. So I was chair of the electrical engineering program at the time, and we have this thing called the Inventure Prize, which we affectionately call the American Idol for Nerds. It's like an invention competition program for our students. And so students invent things, and then it's a year-long progress, and we have a live TV production in front of judges, a lot like American Idol, where 5 teams of students presented their ideas, yelling and screaming, people in the audience, live on TV. And the team that won came to me 2 days after and said, "What do I do next?" And I thought it was obvious. You start a company, and you keep going. And it turns out we didn't really have the ability for students to take their ideas and ultimately create companies. And so we got started. We got started on that. I did that together with a couple of colleagues. And now we started with 5 companies, an incubator program of 5 companies. And now last year we started 110 student-led startups just in 1 year. And kind of we now have a whole set of programs for students that we call Learn, Make, and Launch. And so a lot of universities, the way that they approach startups for students is they think that they basically say you have to have a team and you have to have an idea, and if you do, we'll help you start a company. We start way back. You don't need a team, you don't need an idea. We'll teach you how to get an idea, a true, authentic idea that maybe someone will buy. We teach you all that, and then you kind of work through building, say, a prototype and then having an incubator for that. And so there's a suite of offerings. And like the first course is called it's called Venture Lab, Startup a startup lab, and that's kind of come to our class and we'll kind of teach you kind of startup engineering, right? You don't have to have an idea, you don't have a team. by the end of this course, you will, and then we'll see whether it kind of moves along. And that's so it's a huge ecosystem. We teach about 3,000 or 4,000 students a year through those programs, and as I said, then that kind of funnels down to how many startups do you do every year? And like I said, we did about 110 startups last year. It's the largest student startup program in the U.S. Everyone thinks of Stanford, everyone thinks of Berkeley or MIT. We're by far the biggest startup program in the U.S.
Oh, so what are some of the coolest things that you've seen students make here?
Oh my gosh. There's a ton. The one that's top of mind because actually I used it the other day. One of our very first startups was a company called Fixed, Fixd. So you know that like when you take your car in to get a service, the technician plugs in a cable, below the dashboard to kind of, tap into the car computer. Well, we had students who developed their own little dongle that they plugged in, right? And that dongle wirelessly connects to your phone. And so when the check engine light comes on, right, rather than having to, because normally you have to take it to the shop to kind of figure out why the check engine light's on. In this case, this will communicate to your cell phone, and your cell phone will tell you what's wrong. Is it really serious? Is it not serious? And that company has now sold many, many millions of these things. They've been in business for quite a few years. They have dozens, if not hundreds, of employees. They're a thriving company. They've done extraordinarily well. Super, super exciting. I want to give another example because this actually, I think, goes to like maybe some of the folks that are watching this. We had a company that's now called Stored, Stord. This was a company that actually was started by a student between their senior year in high school and freshman year at Georgia Tech. They were going to be a freshman first year at Georgia Tech. They found out about this program and said, "Hey, I haven't even started at Georgia Tech. Can I come into your summer incubator because I have this idea?" This idea was basically Uber for junk in your house. Take things that were in your house that maybe needed to be stored. They would come and pick it up, and they would find space for it and sort it. That's not their business today. Their business is now a multi-billion-dollar business that has many hundreds of employees, and the student that started it is still the CEO, and they've gotten huge investments from Silicon Valley venture firms. Out of the 500 or so student startups that we've started, we have a handful that are now over $1 billion. And so we're having a ton of success because we have really, really smart students and they have great resources on our campus and connections and mentors and a whole ecosystem that allows them to do it. So like students who are watching this, who you think you might want to start a company, but you don't really know how to do it, or you don't have an idea, but it sounds really cool, come here. We'll show you how to do it.
So, a few weeks ago, I got to talk to Kahinde Williams, who graduated from Georgia Tech a couple years ago and didn't go through CreateX, but he made a startup called Shepherd, which basically uses AI to help tutor you on whatever subjects you want. So
Awesome.
you kind of plug in your materials and then you can ask it questions, make flashcards, things like that. How do you think AI is going to impact education?
This can change everything, right? And everybody always says like MOOCs 10 years ago, this idea online was going to change everything. But I think it's going to fundamentally change, I would say, kind of all aspects of our business, both what it is we teach in our courses, how it is we teach our courses, and then how we do our business here. I think all three of those are, in the process of changing. Rohan, do you know what a makerspace is? I think you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just announced an AI makerspace. This is a virtual makerspace funded by NVIDIA, so the largest, chip company in the space. This is a virtual makerspace for students. It's the most powerful supercomputer in the world for students to try out. It's a sandbox to try out their ideas, try out. It's a sandbox to play around with AI place. And so we're that kind of a thing that our students will come and they'll be able to use their student projects and to make use of this resource to kind of create their own chat GPTs. I call it chat GT. This kind of new little space that will be students will be able to create their own foundational models just like ChatGPT or Anthropic or all the others. And so that's super, super exciting. It's going to be kind of embedded in how it is we educate students. Super exciting.
Have you seen any applications of it happen already?
Um, s- um, yes, I would say, as you pointed out, like I would probably in Create X, probably a third of the student startups that are coming through then last summer were had some component of AI in that, doing a whole bunch of different applications. In our case, where I'm more involved in is like how we teach AI, how we make sure that every student here kind of it's not just how do you use ChatGPT. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to teach the basic fundamentals about what's behind it, how it is you might trust it, how it is you assemble data, how you protect it, what are the ethics, right? That's kind of what we're really, really focused on is building the courses so that students not only know how to use these tools, they know what's behind, and then they would actually develop their own tools.
Yeah. So for my last question, I wanted to ask if you have one piece of advice for someone who's still in high school or early in college wanting to follow a similar career path as you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more, one of the things that I'm sure parents, people like me say all the time, find your passion. And when you find your passion, then, kind of, that's the most important thing to find a passion, to then kind of, build and grow and flourish in that. But most people don't know what that is. You don't, like it's okay to not know what you're completely passionate about, because you'll figure it out, right? And it's not necessarily, it's less important. I think it's more find leverage the things that you're good at and kind of follow those. And I think opportunities, the things that you're good at, if you follow them, opportunities will pop up. Maybe something that you're extremely passionate about will emerge, maybe not, but it's just kind of like being open because I think students feel a ton of pressure today to be perfect, to have the right idea, to be, to get into the right school and so on. Like it's going to be okay to try to, be easy on yourself when it comes to finding a passion, when it comes to, picking a major and so on. Follow the things that you're good at and those things will happen from it.
All right then. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
You betcha.